4,500 years ago, during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu, whose name would echo through every century that followed, an army of workers, engineers, stonecutters, architects, and master craftsmen set their hands to a task so staggering in its ambition that modern architects and structural engineers still debate exactly how it was accomplished. They were not simply building a royal tomb in the ordinary sense of the word. To the ancient Egyptians, this monument represented something far greater. It was a bridge between earth and eternity, a monument intended to secure the pharaoh's place among the gods and preserve his legacy for all time. Every measurement, every angle, every stone placement carried religious meaning as well as engineering purpose. Nothing about the project was accidental. Every decision reflected generations of accumulated knowledge, careful planning, and extraordinary precision. They quarried approximately 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, with the average block weighing around 2.5 tons, while some of the massive granite beams forming the king's chamber weighed as much as 80 tons each. Many of these enormous stones were transported hundreds of miles from the granite quarries at Aswan, a logistical achievement that remains astonishing even by modern standards. Block by block, layer by layer, they assembled a structure so precisely engineered that its 4 base sides, stretching across more than 13 acres of desert, differ from one another by less than 20 centimeters. They aligned the entire monument almost perfectly to true north with an accuracy of roughly 1/15 of 1 degree, a level of precision that still surprises professional surveyors using modern equipment. The pyramid's foundation itself is leveled to within only about 2.1 centimeters across its enormous base, demonstrating a mastery of measurement that few ancient civilizations have ever matched. For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid stood as the tallest structure ever built by human hands, holding that record for nearly 38 centuries, until medieval cathedrals finally surpassed its height. It survived earthquakes, invasions, looting, violent sandstorms, and the collapse of entire civilizations. Kingdoms rose and disappeared around it. Empires conquered Egypt and vanished into history. Languages were born, evolved, and died, while the pyramid remained almost unchanged, silently watching the world transform around it. Yet, despite being one of the most studied monuments on Earth, it continued to guard many of its greatest mysteries. Then, when the final outer casing stones were placed and the last worker walked away, the Great Pyramid became sealed. Hidden chambers disappeared into complete darkness. Narrow passageways were locked behind millions of pounds of stone. Whatever knowledge its builders intended to preserve remained untouched for thousands of years. Explorers, treasure hunters, archaeologists, engineers, and historians would spend centuries trying to understand what still lay concealed inside those massive walls. Some believed every chamber had already been found. Others suspected that enormous undiscovered spaces remained hidden somewhere deep within the structure, waiting for technology capable of seeing through solid stone. That breakthrough finally began to arrive in the 21st century. Instead of relying on explosives, drilling, or destructive excavation, scientists turned to one of the most advanced technologies ever used in archaeology. By tracking naturally occurring cosmic ray muons, tiny particles constantly passing through our planet, they could effectively create an X-ray image of the pyramid's interior without removing a single stone. The results hinted at something remarkable, a previously unknown void hidden high above the Grand Gap for millennia. And then, in March of 2023, a camera only 6 millimeters wide was carefully threaded through a tiny gap between 2 ancient stone blocks on the pyramid's northern face. For the first time in history, modern eyes looked directly into a space that had remained sealed since the age of the pharaohs. As the camera crossed the threshold, the screen illuminated with images no living person had ever seen before. Join us now as we explore what that tiny camera revealed, how particle physics uncovered hidden spaces long before the camera arrived, and why the discoveries made inside the Great Pyramid during the last decade are forcing historians to rethink one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements. The reason this story is so difficult to dismiss, so impossible to file away as yet another romantic exaggeration about ancient Egypt, is that the discovery was made not by treasure hunters or mystics, but by particle physicists, using the same technology that maps the inside of nuclear reactors and monitors the magma chambers of active volcanoes. The project was called Scan Pyramids, launched in 2015 as a collaboration between Cairo University and the French IP Institute, Heritage Innovation Preservation. The Scan Pyramids mission systematically mapped the Great Pyramid using muon detectors, infrared thermography, and 3-dimensional reconstruction. Between 2015 and 2023, producing 2 landmark findings that fundamentally redefined what the world knows about this 4,500-year-old structure. The core technology, muon radiography, works through a principle so elegant it borders on poetry. Cosmic rays from deep space strike the top of Earth's atmosphere every second of every day. When they collide with atmospheric particles, they shatter into smaller subatomic fragments. One of those fragments is called a muon. Muons rain down on every square meter of the planet in a constant, invisible drizzle. They pass through almost everything, through your body, through solid wood, through layers of soil and concrete. But they do not pass through dense stone with perfect efficiency. The denser the material, the more muons it absorbs. And wherever empty space hides inside solid rock, more muons pass through, unimpeded. The Scan Pyramids team placed detector arrays inside the known chambers of the pyramid, counting muons one particle at a time, day after day, month after month, building a density map of the pyramid's interior from the inside out, using the entire universe as their light source. And then the universe showed them something nobody had recorded in 4,000 years of study. In 2016, the detectors picked up the first anomaly, an excess of muons passing through a zone near the north face that could only mean one thing. Something hollow was sitting in a region that every map, every architectural survey, every century of Egyptological study had described as solid stone. A second void was discovered behind the chevrons area of the north face, above the descending corridor. The void, named the Scan Pyramids North Face Corridor, was located between 17 and 23 meters from the pyramid's ground level, between 0.7 and 2 meters from the north face, and had a corridor-like shape that could be horizontal or sloping upward. The team checked it against every known plan of the pyramid's interior. There was nothing in that position. The official architecture said solid rock. The cosmic rays said hollow, and the cosmic rays were right. Then, in 2017, they found something that stopped the scientific world in its tracks. On November 2nd, 2017, the Scan Pyramids team published in Nature its detection of what they named the Scan Pyramids Big Void, describing a newly discovered huge void in an area above the Grand Gallery. It is estimated to have a length of at least 30 meters and a similar cross-section as the Grand Gallery. The Big Void was observed by 3 teams of physicists from different points of view, and 3 scientific institutions specializing in particle physics worked independently, each using a different and complementary muography technique. 3 separate detection technologies, 3 independent research teams, 3 separate analyses, all arriving at the same conclusion. A void above the Grand Gallery, the most soaring and extraordinary passage in the entire pyramid, its ceiling an ancient, corbelled marvel of stone engineering, and directly above it, the cosmic rays revealed a space the size of a commercial aircraft with no known way in and no recorded existence in any document, any survey, or any architectural study produced in the entire history of Egyptology. The Big Void is estimated at roughly 8 meters high, 2 meters wide, and at least 40 meters long, positioned about 20 meters above the pyramid's ground level, its cross-section closely mirroring that of the Grand Gallery. Below it, one scientist described it as the discovery of the century. Another said no one had even imagined a void that large could be sitting above the Grand Gallery. It was the first major interior structure found in the Great Pyramid since the Middle Ages. Let the reality of that number settle for a moment. 40 meters of empty space, the size of an aircraft cabin, hidden inside 6 million tons of limestone, sitting directly above the grandest passage and the most studied monument on Earth, and connected to nothing. No corridor leads to it, no shaft approaches it, no stairway climbs toward it. The builders of this pyramid, who left carefully constructed passages and shafts connecting every other significant space within the structure, built a space the size of an airplane and then made absolutely certain no one could walk into it. The purpose of this region remains a mystery, leaving researchers cautious in describing the find. In a press briefing, the co-leader of the research stressed they should not call it a chamber because, as he explained, they had no architectural interpretation for what it was. Harvard Egyptologist Peter Dermanuelian put it plainly when he said it was big, it was real, and it was worthy of further investigation. Whether it was a chamber, a construction anomaly, or something else entirely, he said was simply not possible to determine at that time. But before we go deeper into what the cosmic rays found and what it means, there's a layer of this story that almost nobody discusses. A discovery made not inside the pyramid, but in the desert beside the Red Sea, that changes the human dimension of everything. In 2013, a team of French and Egyptian archaeologists excavating the ancient harbor site of Wadi el-Jarf on the Egyptian Red Sea coast pulled open a sealed limestone cave and found something extraordinary. Hidden in a cave at the ancient Red Sea port of Wadi el-Jarf, hundreds of inscribed papyrus fragments were discovered, the oldest ever unearthed in Egypt. As Egyptologists Pierre Tallet and Gregory Marwar detailed in a 2014 article in the journal Near Eastern Archaeology, the ancient texts included a logbook from the 27th year of the reign of the pharaoh Khufu that described the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This document, known as the Diary of Merer, is the oldest papyrus with text ever found on Earth. And it was written by a man who was actually there. Merer was a middle-ranking official with the title of inspector, and his diary dates to the 26th year of the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. The best preserved sections document the transportation of white limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to Giza by boat. About every 10 days, 2 or 3 round trips were completed, shipping perhaps 30 blocks of 2 to 3 tons each, amounting to 200 blocks per month, with about 40 boatmen working under Merer. Think about what this document represents. The hand of a man who participated in building the Great Pyramid, writing down his daily work in real time 4,500 years ago, and what his diary reveals is not a story of enslaved masses driven by whips under the desert sun. Modern archaeology estimates that 20,000 to 30,000 workers, not enslaved people as was long believed, but organized laborers provided with food, housing, and medical care, quarried and set those blocks over roughly 20 years. Merer's diary describes a sophisticated logistical network involving quarries, harbors, canals, and scheduled delivery rotations that would not look out of place in a modern construction management system. The diary also mentions the original name of the Great Pyramid, Akhet Khufu, meaning horizon of Khufu, and identifies Khufu's half-brother Ankaf as the director overseeing some of the construction during its completion, the first time a definitive person was identified as managing specific aspects of the pyramid's construction. This was not chaos. This was not brute force applied blindly. This was project management of extraordinary sophistication, coordinating tens of thousands of specialized workers, Red Sea Harbor, Nile River transport logistics, quarrying operations, and a construction schedule precise enough to produce a structure leveled to within 2 centimeters of perfect across 13 acres of desert, all under the reign of a single king who ruled for roughly 27 years. The existence of Merer's diary matters to the hidden void story because it confirms something important about how the Egyptians worked. They recorded everything. They were obsessive documentarians. Every delivery, every worker rotation, every month of logistical activity was written down and archived. And yet, there's not a single document, not one papyrus, not one inscription anywhere in the archaeological record that explains what the big void is, why it was built, or what purpose it serves. For a civilization that wrote down the number of limestone blocks delivered on a Tuesday in the 26th year of Khufu's reign, the complete silence around the pyramid's most significant interior space is extraordinary. Either those records were destroyed, or they were hidden, or they describe something that the people who found them in later centuries chose not to preserve. The silence itself is a clue, and it leads directly back into the pyramid. This is where the story deepens into something genuinely unsettling, because the same Egyptian civilization that built this void, that sealed it with such completeness that it evaded detection for 4,500 years, left behind an extensive written record describing exactly this kind of thing. For generations, scholars read those descriptions as religious metaphor, as spiritual poetry, as the theological language of a civilization obsessed with the journey of the soul after death. The Egyptians wrote about sealed chambers within their sacred structures. They wrote about a duat, a hidden interior region that was neither the world of the living nor the world of the dead, but a space between, a space sealed on purpose, a space that existed and could not be entered. They wrote about chambers of the horizon, sealed inner spaces tied to the king's transformation, rooms that existed but were unreachable by the living. And for 2 centuries of modern Egyptology, that language was cataloged, studied, translated, and filed under theology. Not architecture, not a floor plan, theology. But this was a civilization that aligned a 6 million ton structure to true north with an accuracy of 1/15 of 1 degree using no compass, no GPS, and no modern instruments of any kind. During the summer solstice, the sun sets precisely between the pyramids of Khufu and Khafre, as seen from the Great Sphinx, a celestial alignment encoded into the placement of the entire Giza complex with deliberate astronomical precision. These were not people who used imprecise language. These were not people who described things carelessly. When they said there was a sealed interior space, the cosmic ray data has now confirmed they were describing something real. And then came the corridor. In 2023, the Scan Pyramids team returned to that first anomaly behind the chevrons on the north face, the one detected back in 2016, the one that had been quietly building in the data for 7 years. By 2023, they had confirmed its dimensions through muon radiography, ground-penetrating radar, and ultrasound. They knew where it was. They knew approximately how large it was. What they needed was eyes inside it. Using a high-frequency ground-penetrating radar, the team found an opening in the joint behind the lower blocks of the chevrons, which made it possible to introduce a state-of-the-art endoscope with a diameter of only 5 millimeters, thinner than a standard pencil. Through that gap, they pushed a camera into darkness that had been sealed since approximately 2560 BCE. The footage showed a rectangular passage with a gabled ceiling, those iconic chevron blocks, used to distribute weight. It measured about 2 meters wide and 9 meters long, and it was empty. Not looted empty, not collapsed. Clean? Pristine. Limestone that looked as though it had been placed recently, untouched since the workers sealed it 4,500 years ago. But here's the detail that nobody in the official press releases dwelled on for very long. The corridor was not just sitting there unprotected behind the pyramid's outer casing. It was sitting behind a structure called a chevron. Massive stone beams set at an angle to form a gabled peak, designed to take the crushing weight of the pyramid above and push it outward and away from the empty space below. The ancient builders constructed a stress shield over a hidden void. And there were many of them. Far more than engineering necessity would seem to require for a space this small. The deputy coordinator of the project asked the question out loud in the scientific record, noting that the use of so many heavy guardian stones to protect such a relatively small area raised the obvious question of whether that area was the way in to something larger, something that lay beyond the end of the corridor, something that the camera could not yet see. Because the corridor ends, and beyond that end, the camera cannot reach, and nobody knows what is there. The chevrons themselves are one of the most fascinating clues in this entire investigation. Directly above the king's chamber sit 5 low, cramped spaces stacked one on top of another, called relieving chambers. Their entire purpose is to take the unimaginable weight of the stone above and channel it around the room below so the ceiling never collapses. The builders were thinking in layers, stacking voids on purpose to manage forces they understood with terrifying sophistication. This is not speculation. This is established structural engineering encoded in 4,005 100-year-old stone. The Egyptians understood load distribution at a level of complexity that required the modern world to develop particle physics detectors just to find the evidence of it. The Great Pyramid of Khufu achieved alignment to true north within 6 minutes of arc, a level of precision described by archaeologist and engineer Glenn Dash as an accuracy of better than 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15 of 1 degree. A structure of 6 million tons, aligned to the poles of the Earth to within a fraction of a degree, built with layered internal voids for structural purposes and sealed interior spaces of unknown function, using an understanding of physics and engineering that modern researchers are still reverse engineering with supercomputers and cosmic ray detectors. The comfortable word for this is extraordinary. The honest word is something closer to incomprehensible. Now, there's an important truth to tell here, one that the most credible version of this story requires. The Scan Pyramids researchers themselves have been careful, rigorously, meticulously careful. The co-leader of the research made clear they had no architectural interpretation for the big void. The researchers refused to claim they had found a secret tomb, refused to speculate, insisting their goal as engineers was to find air, not gold. The most likely functional explanation for the big void is that it is a large-scale version of the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, a construction space engineered to redistribute the colossal weight, pressing down on the grand gallery so the entire internal passage system does not eventually collapse under millions of tons of stone. This is not a prosaic explanation. Even this explanation is staggering. It means the ancient Egyptians understood the internal stress dynamics of a 6 million ton limestone structure in sufficient detail to engineer a 40-meter hidden cavity in precisely the right position to prevent catastrophic structural failure 4,000 years into the future. Using no steel, no computer modeling, no modern materials science, they solved a problem that took humanity 3,000 years to rediscover the mathematics to even describe. But the engineering explanation, as powerful as it is, does not fully close every gap the data has opened. The researchers themselves acknowledge they still have unpublished findings about the big void that they intend to release in the future. Whether the void is a chamber, a construction anomaly, or something else is not possible to say. Its exact shape and slope remain unresolved, and multiple geometric hypotheses are consistent with the muon data. The shafts leading out of the king's and queen's chambers, each about 30 centimeters wide, have been sent robotic explorers multiple times. They are definitely man-made, and they remain completely mysterious, their purpose unresolved despite every technological effort directed at them. The pyramid is not a problem that has been solved. It is a problem that has been measured more precisely than before, which is a very different thing. A 2025 study by German and Egyptian archaeologists employed radar, electrical resistivity, and ultrasound techniques to investigate a mysterious air-filled void beneath the Menkaure pyramid, with images from a remotely operated camera suggesting a void on the pyramid's east side might contain a hidden second entrance. The investigations are expanding, the discoveries are multiplying, and access to the most important findings remains, in the official language of the researchers themselves, off the table. This is the point where honest journalism and honest history must acknowledge something uncomfortable. The big void has never been entered, not once. Further exploration of the big void would most likely involve alterations to the ancient structure that must be carefully considered, meaning no practical plans to access it directly currently exist. The corridor opened in 2023 was viewed through a 5mm endoscope, and then sealed again exactly as it was found. No drilling, no widening, no entry, no robot sent down its length. The justification is preservation, and it is a serious justification. Archaeology carries a brutal history of destroying the very evidence it was seeking to understand, of blasting through ancient walls with dynamite and losing forever what was on the other side. The caution is defensible. But notice what it produces, the single most significant interior. Discovery in this monument in over 100 years, confirmed by multiple independent technologies published in the world's most prestigious scientific journals. And the official position is that we will observe it through cosmic ray shadows and a camera thinner than a pencil, and we will not go in. We can prove it exists. We can estimate its dimensions. We cannot say what is inside it. And the pattern continues to repeat. We get close enough to confirm the mystery is real, and then the access ends. When the big void was announced in 2017, Egypt's leading Egyptologist initially told the New York Times the paper offered nothing to Egyptology. Zero. Then, when the North Face corridor was confirmed and viewed with an endoscope, the same voice called it a major discovery that would enter the homes of people all over the world for the first time. The management of the narrative around these discoveries has been, to put it diplomatically, careful. Every public statement has worked to lower the temperature, to make the most surprising find. In modern Egyptology, sound like a footnote about load-bearing masonry. But the physics does not have a temperature to manage. The physics simply reports what is there. What is there is this: a pyramid built 4,500 years ago to such structural and astronomical precision that the modern world is still using particle physics to understand it. A massive sealed void with no entrance, no connection to any known interior space, and no confirmed purpose. A guarded corridor, sealed behind more protective stone than its apparent size requires, opening onto questions rather than answers. Shafts that are definitely man-made and definitely mysterious. A civilization that wrote down every delivery of limestone blocks but left no document explaining its greatest interior mystery. And a body of written religious text that described sealed hidden chambers inside sacred monuments with a precision that particle physics is now confirming was literal rather than metaphorical. There's a final thought worth sitting with, one that changes how you should look at every ancient structure you have ever seen a photograph of. The Egyptians believed history moved in cycles. They believed civilizations rose, reached their fullness, and then collapsed back into chaos, only for order to emerge. Again from the wreckage. They documented this belief obsessively across 3,000 years of recorded history. They were not writing for themselves. They were writing with the explicit and stated intention that the writing would survive for whoever came next. They built their monuments not merely to be seen, but to be read. They encoded practical, physical, astronomical precision into structures designed to outlast every empire that followed them. And into their greatest monument, the one engineered to stand unchanged for literally as long as the planet would permit, they sealed spaces that no one alive today has ever seen. The same hands that wrote down every boatload of limestone in Merer's meticulous diary left no explanation for what sits sealed above the Grand Gallery. That silence is the loudest thing in 4,500 years of stone. Either those spaces are empty structural features so precisely engineered that the civilization which built them remains beyond our full comprehension, or they are not empty, and either answer to that question is terrifying in its own way. Because the engineering answer alone, the answer that says these are simply load-bearing voids, already forces us to acknowledge that 4,500 years ago, human beings understood structural physics well enough to solve problems we needed supercomputers to detect. And the other answer, the answer that says something was deliberately sealed inside the most permanent structure ever built by human hands, forces us to ask what kind of civilization buries knowledge in 40 meters of stone-sealed darkness, and then leaves the rest of history to spend millennia trying to find it. The pyramid is still up there on the Giza plateau right now, the same 6 million tons of stone it was the day the last block was set. The big void is still sealed inside it, 40 meters of darkness that the cosmic rays can see and no human hand has touched in 4,500 years. The corridor behind the chevrons is sealed again, its far end still unexamined. The shafts still reach in directions nobody has fully explained. The permits for further exploration have not been granted. And humanity stands at the threshold of the most important building ever constructed, able to see its shadow through particle physics, able to thread a camera through a crack the width of a pencil, and not yet permitted to take a single step further inside. The pyramid that stayed locked for 4,000 years was not finally opened. It was finally seen. And what was seen was a building still keeping its largest secret in plain sight, on the most studied monument on Earth, waiting for the moment when the world is finally ready to find out what is inside. If this reshaped how you see the ancient world, the next investigation on your screen picks up exactly where this one goes quiet, with the part of this story that the official record has been slowest to address. Hit like, subscribe, and do not let the next chapter wait.